Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Ishura Season 2, Episode 7. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we catch up with Hargit and, Logrix. They're basically going to hunt down Lucnoca. I'm struggling with that name. I would have never known she was a dragon because I've seen her in the opening and the ending, and she looks very deer-ish. So I never would have realized she's considered a dragon, which is interesting. I mean, it's like at least Alice looks more dragon-esque, and Rigneji obviously looks very dragon-esque. The thing that Alice killed. I mean, maybe Alice isn't considered a dragon. I don't remember now. But yeah, the thing killed in episode 2, which, Hargit's referencing because he's thinking about that and Kurt's death in the last season as well. Because they're there to challenge the thing because this thing is undefeated. It's considered like the strongest. And yeah, this thing kind of effortlessly beats people. Because it doesn't really, because it apparently the place they're in right now, it's like this used to be a tropical place until Lucnoca ended up turning this into kind of a winterland. Interestingly enough, because we found out later on from the narrator that this world's seasons don't work out the same way they do in the distant world. It's they have different seasons and stuff like that. This world, it's not till everything dies at the very end, once a year when everything dies is when winter comes, So I was like, oh, that's really interesting to know that. Also interesting when we find out Lucnoca is apparently the only one, at least records-wise, that has ice word arts, which I think is so interesting. Because I'm trying to think, have we ever seen ice-based word arts? We've seen probably ice-related abilities that might not be word arts related, but I was like, that's interesting. I mean, because a lot of the word arts we've seen have been wind, maybe wind, lightning, and probably every single other element except ice, which I think is so fascinating. She's got this very elegance to her when she shows up, because Lagretz is all about proving himself, especially when he references one of his biggest inspirations is Roskilde, which you can even hear Hargit being well, you shouldn't, he feels bad about that considering that's your idol, and obviously he's in the know. He knows Roskilde is a false idol. They put him on that pedestal, but knowing none of that is fully just Roskilde, that there's more built into him. He's built up to be this idol. And so for Reklex, he was he's always dreamed of fighting and slaying a dragon is all he's ever wanted. And, people ridiculed him for that dream. But until he saw Roskilde, rise to the occasion, it's that guy, he made me feel like my dream wasn't impossible, which is sad. Once again, you're putting all your faith into someone that doesn't truly exist, which is also sad, too, considering Roskilde wants to prove himself. He wants to get stronger and better so that the falsehood that he is presented as, he can at least, try and hold on to some self-esteem and acclaim as this great warrior by that maybe he hopes at one point he won't have to rely on the mantle and the belief of who he is as Roskilde, that he can triumph and win on his own. That's why he fights tough opponents. He wants people to really push him to the edge so that he can really become stronger, so that he can more so rely on himself than others, because Roskilde, wants to be real and not just his falsehood. But either way, Lucnoca doesn't care about that she has this name of being so undefeated. So she tells Logretz, it's oh, you could say you beat me, easy peasy, you walk away. And even Hargit, it's no, you won the title, all that matters is she kind of gave you the win. But for him, it's that's, which I think is the irony, not the irony, it's the beauty, the irony to it to some extent, considering the person you believe to be real, Roskilde, wants to try and prove himself just like you do. So he goes against her, and Lucnoca kind of respects it to some extent, where it's just all right, this is what you want, and fights him. And he walks away with a broken sword, and his right arm is twisted from her attack. Because he's oh, I dodged a claw, but not entirely, because he still suffered damage from it and ends up passing out from it. But Hargit tries to stop her. He's I see it in your eyes. I know what's kind of holding you back. It's because you've lost hope, because so many have come towards you and they've died. It's like, are you looking for a strong opponent to defeat you? And I think it got to the point she's just like, no, all the people that have come to me over and over again, an elf, some minions. It's like, because she talks about like Legretz and Hargit are the first minions that have come to her in a very long time. And it's like, right, what's the point of keeping this going? I'll just give you the victory. It doesn't mean anything to me, but also just on some level, it's like maybe it does, and it's just you've gotten so disheartened because you've never found a strong enough opponent to like make you feel like it was worth it. It's just always been such a one-sided battle. She tried to deter so many other opponents, but just like Lagretz, it's like going after you has kind of been their dream, so you keep them going, and it's just maybe being someone's ambition is not what she wants. So maybe she hopes that when she fights a truly worthy opponent, maybe it'll stop people coming after her. Maybe she'll find something more to live for. I don't know what she's planning to get out of it. We didn't get a lot from Lucnoca. Is just kind of like Hargit speaking to her. And so he tells her about Alice. It's like all that he accomplished. Oh, he killed Taroa. He killed the dragon from like episode 2. It's like he's done a lot. So he's an opponent you should be looking at. So she makes her way to Eurasia to participate in the Royal Games. So we have Hargit picking up Largritz to take him away. So that's where things are on that front. The back half of the episode, I was initially being like, oh, is this, because this guy's in the opening and he has a camera, like the squad he was with, because I guess they were all going to the library he was referencing. It's not really called a library. It's like, well, it is a library, but sorry, once again, I know some people, there's one person in particular that hated the way I say library because I say it the way I do. But I know, like, it's like, oh, it's because it's like they're books from the distant world that have landed here, and it's I guess an entire library from the distant world came here, and it's a very specific ruin that people try to go to. It's like apparently there was a woman that read so many books from there, and when she kind of came out from it with that knowledge, she became a noblewoman. But that place is currently guarded by lichens, and so you can't really go in there and willy-nilly. And the main lichen we're dealing with this episode, well, his name is Hing. He ends up slaughtering the entire group, but except for the guy that was running his mouth, which we see him at the very end of the episode. So I'm curious to see what role he plays, because I was wondering, I was like, oh, I thought, like, because he first pops up, I'm like, oh, is he that guy? But to be fair, it's like sometimes multiple characters pop up in someone else's story. So it's like, it might be his story later on in the season. You know, he could also be a named character that just isn't one of the main people. But I'm wondering, because like in the intro, he has a camera, which I'm like, is the camera special? Is his conjunction with the camera special? Because immediately I think of like Speedgrapher. I can't remember the main protagonist of Speedgrapher. It's not like Saigo or something like that. I can't remember his name, but it's been so many years since I saw Speedgrapher. I want to say like everything he took a photo of explodes, if I remember correctly. My point is, I'm wondering, does he have a special ability like that? Or is he just going to be like the chronicler of like this whole thing? Like he's going to make his way to Eurasia because maybe he had no idea about all this, and he's going to go there and be the one that captures this story of like, you know, this game to decide like, oh, if the true demon, the person who killed the true demon king actually shows up and participates, and who kind of ends up being the crowning hero throughout this whole tale. I don't know if that's going to be his shtick, but the episode really revolves around Ooze, an Ooze named, I can't remember how they pronounced it. Is it Psianop or Psianop? I can't remember how they went about pronouncing it, but it's a giant intellectual ooze that's reading books. It basically, when that guy was talking about the library, it went and did that. Because we also found out like the lichens are trained by Neft, which was like, oh cool, another person from the first party. We got introduced to the other person in the last episode. I'm blanking on her name now. But we also found out that Psianop was actually part of that first crew too, except they left Psianop behind because they're like, yeah, you can't do anything against the true Demon King. Which, I mean, obviously they couldn't either, considering 75% of that squad got wiped. So, you know, because only 2 people survived, and I guess technically 3, considering Psianop never had an opportunity. So Psianop has spent the last 21 years training, trying to get better. So Neft shows up, and Psianop is challenging Neft to a fight. And it's like, because Psianop is very good. We find out apparently all the books Psianop read were martial arts books. So Psianop is able to like read your movements and kind of tell like based on like what movements you're kind of prepping to make, what your actual strikes will be, and is able to kind of predict them and stuff like that. And constantly throughout the battle, it's like, was I right? Because it needs the confirmation so it knows like, okay, I'm going in the right direction. Like, was I able to predict you correctly? Because you want to also probably see like how often you get your predictions right. So if I can guess what your movements are going to be and I'm right, if I do it again and again and again, I know I know my sense of battle is a little more like precise and intact. Nep's situation was really interesting because it basically seems like every time he gets beat up, he basically like pops his bones back into place. I thought it was interesting because he's basically like for like the next 850 counts, so I guess like 850 seconds, he becomes like this unstoppable thing where it's like he probably pushes all pain away, and like any broken bones he immediately slaps into place. So he becomes like this, like I'm ignoring all the pain and just putting my body back together and just kind of going berserk and going ham. But ultimately, Psianop ends up beating him after a relentless strike, this and that, not giving him a chance to like recover at the end. Doesn't kill him, but it's like, hey, I kept that promise to you that I was going to do this. But the problem is like, right, all of this was for the purposes of proving myself that I could defeat the true Demon King. Maybe I could have done it back then, maybe, but I'll never know now considering the true Demon King is dead now. But Neft is like, well, then go to Eurasia where they're having this big tournament. It's like, if you can't prove that you beat the true Demon King because the true Demon King is dead, but if you can defeat the person who defeated the true Demon King, it's kind of the same equivalency. So pops off, and that's where they're going. So I wasn't expecting that to be this Ooze's story. Was not expecting that. What was I expecting? I don't know. I never really gave it too much thought. I'm just like, oh, that's a giant. Ooh, I wasn't even expecting it to talk and stuff like that, but it just, I didn't know what to expect from it. So I wasn't even thinking the term ooze. I was just like, is that like a like sentient water ball, or like what is that thing? You know, I guess it'd be like it being an ooze and everything. Kind of reminds me of like this, because obviously like, well, not, it's not the same dark shade of blue, but it kind of definitely gives you like the same vibe as like a slime from the Dragon Quest series. I mean, especially when you get into like the king slime territory, you know, because those things are like massive. But yeah, some very interesting developments, some interesting characters to get introduced to. I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us, what new character we get introduced to in the grand scheme of everything. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. And the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.